Hi everyone, on today's rendition of Theater Rainbow, I'm in my front yard to talk about a wonderful 3-act play that takes place on one set for all 3 acts in the front yard between 2 houses in a suburban neighborhood. The play itself is written by Arthur Miller. It's from a whole collection that he has called All My Sons.
I wonder about the genre of Arthur Miller's writing. He was a realistic playwright, and he had things to say at the beginning of the collection that I read this play from that I wanted to be noted before we begin. He said, I have from the beginning been dubbed a realistic playwright for both good and specious reasons. My first play to draw any attention, All My Sons, was indeed in the tradition of Ibsen's social plays. At the time, 1947, I myself made something of this descent in order to regenerate interest and respect for a then neglected master. He continues and says, my approach to playwriting and the drama itself is organic, and to make this glaringly evident at once, it is necessary to separate drama from what we think of today as literature. A drama ought not to be looked at first and foremost from literary perspective merely because it uses words. So my analysis wasn't from reading this play. I also watched it afterwards just so I could get more insight for you guys and know he was not writing just to be read. It is to be seen, and this is a wonderful play to watch if you guys get the chance. I'm going to start by telling you about the characters introduced in this play. They're coming together after World War II, and it takes place in between the 2 houses as mentioned before, and it's the family that lived there and is still living there with the family that lives in the next door house now, and how they interact with the family coming back that used to live in that house, and another family that lives across the street from them that grew up with them as well. The Kellers are the main family. There's Joe and Kate, and their son Chris. A character who does not have an actor is their son Larry, who went missing during World War II. Next up is the Devers, who lived in the house in the past before the war, and the characters that get brought back are Anne and George, a set of siblings. Now in the house is Dr. Jim Bayless and his wife, a nurse named Sue Bayless. The other family involved are the Lubies, who lived close by and live there now, and they're married and have 3 children. The one child that does appear is named Bert.
It is important to note that the playwright included 2 whole pages about what the set should look like and what Mr. Keller should look like. In the rest of the play, there's limited description, and a lot of it was left up to fit into the time period. It opens up with the tree that has fallen down during the storm the night before. The men are wondering how Sue is going to react to it. Chris is waking up Anne, who they picked up the night before. He reveals to his father that he's going to marry her or ask her to get engaged, in hopes that if his mom could get over her enough to let him still marry her, because she wanted to get with Larry, that they can stay close, but that the mother will accept that her son is dead and not coming back. It's interesting because the father agrees with him, but the undertones note that it's not because he thinks this is illogical, but because he himself accepts that Larry's dead and just wants it to be over with his wife, too. They go on, and the neighbors next door interact with each other. There's a ruckus with Bert as he comes and messes with Mr. Keller and upsets Sue again. As they keep getting upset, Anne is questioning why everything is happening, and wonders how they've moved on while she's been in New York. They keep talking and discussing things that happened. They catch up with the Lubies. Frank is working for Mrs. Keller to reveal how the horoscope fits in to prove that Larry is alive. He believes that favorable days have a lot to do with how people keep on living, and if they can keep on living. So if he proves that, he can keep Sue happy. The neighbors next door are doctors and nurses, and so they hope they can just kind of keep taking care of them too. Ultimately, Anne's brother George ends up showing up, and he's a lawyer. He's come to seek revenge against Mr. Keller and prove that Mr. Keller was in fact involved in the reason his dad went to jail and his mom went to New York, and they're about to get separated because he was accused of selling parts to the military that resulted in the death of 21 people. He leaves because he's distraught and just wants Chris to believe him and no one will. Chris begins to question his dad. It ends up getting dropped as they end up getting engaged and preparing for dinner. Chris pushes and pushes his father. At the same time, Anne and Sue are pushing each other about whether or not to marry Larry or Chris or to wait. Through Chris and his father's discussion, he admits that he sold the parts and wasn't willing to close his company for the thing that they'd worked for 40 years. Deaver's father was willing to take the fall for it. It didn't really matter, and he didn't need to feel bad for it. While this is happening, Anne and Sue are arguing, and Anne says, I can get over Larry. I've been over him. I almost got engaged before. She reveals to Sue that she got a letter that Larry killed himself because he knew his father had sold faulty parts to the military and couldn't be a part of that namesake and couldn't keep going on in the war. After this, Sue begins to break down, and that letter is revealed to the men as they're arguing, so now they all know Larry's dead, and Chris wants his father to go to jail and repay the Devers for the fact that no time was spent in jail. He's now over 60 years old, and Mr. Keller doesn't believe he should go to jail. Mr. Keller goes inside, and he ends up killing himself.
Hi guys, now I'm inside to talk to you about themes seen by Arthur Miller's writing. We see the idea that family members cannot get over horrible events just by saying we can do it because of blank family relationship. Mr. Keller can't get over the fact that he killed people because it included his son.
All of the main ideas shown in this play can be summed up by the last line in the show. The mother says, "Don't, dear. Don't take it on yourself. Forget now. Live."